Now let's manage a task using CRUD operations. So begin with creating task management model. Create task factory model instance and then create task resource model property. Next, create task collection factory instance. Create constructor and begin assigning the properties. Create a method getTasks. This method will be responsible to retrieve the task from the database. This method requires the to-do ID, while task ID can be optional. Create collection instance. If task ID is not null, then apply task entity ID filter to the collection. Apply parent ID filter to the collection and specify the to-do ID. We need custom names for some of the task entity columns. So specify the custom alias and assign the desired column names. Specify ID for entity ID and parent ID for parent underscore ID columns. And finally return the array from collection using toArray method from collection instance. Specify method return type array. Let's now create the task controllers. Create a task directory. First of all, create the abstract controller. Extend the controller from the abstract controller. Create task management instance. Now create constructor. Inject the task management dependency and assign the instance to the property. Create get task management protected method and return the task management model instance. Now create the index controller. Extend from abstract task controller and implement the account interface. Implement the required execute method. First, retrieve the request ID parameter and then pass the parent ID parameter. Simply return the success by calling the return success response method and pass the task list retrieved after invoking getTask method from task management model. Specify the parent ID as a first parameter while the task ID second. That's all, our task feed controller is ready. Now is the time to write the task management front-end logic. So first of all, open the JS model directory and create a task manager JS model file. We will use this JS model to process the task operations and logic management. Return the object consisting of properties and functions. Create a function fetchItems which accepts three arguments: parent ID, entity ID, and default object. We will use this function to fetch items and prepare them for the front-end rendering. Create path to the task list controller. Append the parent ID to the path. If entity ID value is specified, then append it to the path as well. Inject the image URL dependency and begin building the URL to the task controller. Create self property and assign the current instance. Inject send get request action JS dependency. Invoke the send get request action and pass service URL parameter. Let's add the logic in a moment. Before that, we will create push items function to simplify things and keep the code clean. This function accepts an item object as parameter. Add the underscore dependency. and call find lost item method from it. We need to inject the task model as well. Specify the task array and search with the item ID. Make sure the item ID is an integer value. Next, we need to convert some of item data to observable. So open the task component and copy convert to observables function. Remove underscore before function name. Pass task ID to integer. Now back in the task component, remove the convert to observables function. Instead, we will use this function from task management JS model. So go ahead and inject task management dependency. Now find all convert to observable function and remove underscore from them and replace current instance with the task management object. So back to the task management JS model and let's continue with the push item logic. Create observable item property and specify the observable items. We have missing knockout dependency, so let's add it. If there were no items present inside the task observable array, then simply push the observable item inside and break the further execution. Otherwise, replace the task identified item with a new item. Now it's the time to put the logic inside the response body. Iterate through each item and just invoke the push item function by passing response item as parameter. Check if default object is defined, then resolve it and pass response to it. Now open the task component and call this method when to-do item gets visible. But before that, we need to filter and validate the active to-do item. So create the function underscore filter by parent. This function requires parent ID. Filter through the task items and match with the provided parent ID. Make sure both compared values should be integer. Inside onChange visibility function, add if condition and call underscore filter by parent function and specify active parent ID as its parameter. If return value has length, then just break the further execution because we will display the local stored items instead of sending request every time for the same item. Next, create the deferred object. We will require to inject jQuery dependency. Now call fetchItems using task manager instance and specify active parent ID as parameter. The task ID here will be null. Then specify the deferred object as last item in parameter. Once the deferred is resolved, trigger the setActiveTask function by providing active parent ID parameter. Make sure the filter IDs are integer within the setActiveTask function. Now open task observable model and replace all of the dummy data with an empty array. Reload the page to see the reflected changes. View tasks of a to-do item and they are empty now. So let's go ahead and add some dummy data for testing purposes through phpMyAdmin. Let's add some tasks to the first item, switch to to-do task entity tab and insert some data. add another task item. Now switch back to Magento tab and without reloading the page, click the view action again. This time the task loaded as expected, and we also observe an update in the to-do interface. So now let's modify one of the task status value to 1 in order to mark it as completed and try again. We observe a 50% progress value since one of the tasks has been completed. Now open the task management model and create a new method saveItem. This method will accept array parameter. Create task model instance using task factory. When create task ID is not empty, load the task item. Before moving further, let's add the load task method first. This method accepts task ID parameter and returns the task model instance. First, retrieve the task instance from task factory model. Then use resource model load method to retrieve the task data from database. Supply task instance in the first parameter and ID in second. Finally, return the task instance. Call the load task method and provide the ID from task data. Now proceed to set the data within the task instance. Set the status from task data using the status index. Then set parent ID field of the task item. To format the dates, we need to add dateTime class dependency and create an instance from it. Inside UpdateItem field, call the gmt_date method from datetime instance and format the date properly. Save the task item and return by getting task item from getTask method. This time we will provide the task ID parameter as well. Specify the return type array. We need to fix the status spellings here. Now add the create controller inside task controller directory. Extend the controller from abstract task class and implement account action interface. Implement the execute method. First retrieve the unserialized post data. If data is empty or task index is not set, then return the failure response. Otherwise, we will return the success response. Provide the task data returned from a task management model. Call saveItem method and pass task data as parameter. Now back in task manager JS model, create saveTaskItem function. This will accept two parameters. The first parameter is required and is a task item object, while second is default object and is an optional parameter. Create the service URL to the create controller and create payload object. We need to format the observable items into plain object. So go ahead and add item resolver dependency first. Now inside payload object, create task key and assign it the task item after resolving through the item resolver. Create a property called self and assign the current instance to it. Inject send post request JS action dependency. Call the send post request and pass service URL and payloads as parameters. On completing the request, traverse through each return the task data items. Then call pushItem function to push or replace the task item inside task observable array. Resolve the default if it's not undefined. Pass the response as parameter. Now let's simplify the response handling logic for task item by creating process response function. It requires response and default object as parameter. Move all of the items to the function from response body. Now simply call the process response function and pass the parameters respectively. We can also simplify the getTask function by calling process response function from there as well. Now open the task component and look for saveTask method. Delete all of the logic for new item. Accept is from visible property. Now create a property self and assign it current instance of component. Then create a default object using jQuery. Now call saveTaskItem from task manager JS model and pass task and default objects as parameters. If default object has been resolved, then hide the form. So move isForm visible property inside the default body. Use self to refer the current component instance. Now it's time to create the deleteTaskItem method inside task management model. Create a method deleteItem. This method will need only task ID parameter. Load the task item using ID. Now add try catch block to handle the exceptions. If task item not found, then throw a localized exception and specify the exception message. However, if item found, invoke delete method from resource model. Specify the task model as parameter. Inside catch block, simply return the false, else return true. You may also write your custom logic to track the exceptions. Now go ahead and create delete controller under task controller directory. Extend abstract task controller and implement the account interface. Additionally, implement HTTP post action interface to make the controller accessible for post requests only. Let's implement the HTTP post interface inside the create controller as well. Now back in a delete controller, let's proceed with implementing the delete logic. First, guess the post unserialized data. If data is empty or task ID index is not present, then return the error response. Return the success response and inside invoke the delete logic and prepare the response data. Now open the task manager JS model and create delete task function. This function will accept item object and default object as parameters. Build the service URL and specify the path to delete task controller. Create payload object and specify the task ID as a property. Retrieve task ID from item object. Invoke the send post request function and specify a service URL and payload object in the parameters. When the request has been completed, check for response data and deleted property. If everything goes well, remove desired item from task array as well. Resolve the default object if not undefined. Next, we need to simplify the delete task item from task component. So first open the list template file and remove $parent context from parameter. Now inside the component, do the same. Simplify the logic by simply calling the delete task function from task manager. Pass task item object as parameter. Time to test the changes we have made so far. Reload the page. View task from first item. Let's add a new task. Close the model and let's add a new task to another to-do item. Delete the completed task. Now reload the page to see if changes were really reflected. Changes have been reflected successfully. Delete the pending task as well. Let's modify the task for first to-do item. Next, we need to add functionality to modify the task status. So go ahead and open the task management model. Create a new method, UpdateStatus. It should accept task ID and status value as parameters. Load the task. Throw an exception if ID was not found. Set the provided value of status field and save the task item. And finally return the true or false value based on modified value. Next we need to create update status controller as well. Extend from abstract task controller and implement the account interface. It should accept the post request. Get the request data. If required parameters are missing, return the failure response. Let's add try and catch blocks with a localized exception handler. Return success if a value modified successfully. From task management, call the update status method and pass all required arguments. The value should be assigned to updated key. While in catch block, simply return the failure response, including the exception message. Now let's prepare the request from front end. So go ahead and open Task Manager JS model and create a new function, update status. It requires item object and deferred object in argument. Build URL to the update status controller. Then add the payload object. Specify the task ID and the status value from item. We need a numeric value for status key. So based on status boolean value, set the value 1 or 0. Now prepare the post request, provide the service URL and then payload object. Once request has been completed successfully, check the response updated value. If everything is okay, then update the item status value. If return value is true, then based on a ternary operator, specify the numeric value. Otherwise, based on ternary operator, specify the alternate numeric value. If deferred is defined, and then resolve it. Now open the task component and create a new function, update status, which requires task object and the context. Create a deferred object. Call update status function from task manager and provide all required arguments. When deferred has been resolved, we need to trigger setActiveTask function by providing the active parent ID property. This will refresh the content accordingly. Hide the form by setting its form visible property to false. Now let's add the function to the click event of the checkbox element. Remove the existing logic inside anonymous function. Invoke the update status function using context property. Specify the parameters. This refers to the current object in the loop, and second parameter specifies the context. So let's see how it goes on output. View task from any of the to-do item. Check the to-do item. Let's verify by reloading the page. So keep on testing with all scenarios.